They call it the locked-in syndrome for a reason. You're trapped in your own body, fully awake, and unable to communicate or move, alone with your thoughts, and desperate to get out of there. To be concise, I must say that I am a little better off with my condition. I'm also completely paralyzed and unable to communicate, but I'm not fully awake. Most of the time I'm in a dreamlike state, detached from the real world. Sometimes I can sense my surroundings though. Rarely voices from the outside world manage to get through to my subconscious mind, and I can fully understand them. This is especially traumatizing when I hear my mother talking to me. I know that she's in there, standing beside my bed, crying in complete despair. I can't do a single thing but suffer in silence. It almost feels as if I wasn't among the living anymore. You're probably wondering why I'm in this awful state. Well, I can't tell. I only know that I'm passionate about parachuting. I guess my miserable state has something to do with my obsession about jumping out of airplanes and dropping 10,000 feet down, only to let a thin layer of nylon decide my fate. As I said, I bet it has something to do with my horrible condition. You're probably dying to know what sort of things a coma patient experiences all day long. Well, first, there is no day. Time is non-existent in my current state. I wander from one dream setting to another. For some reason, I can almost willingly transit between these realities. They're connected through doors. There's 3 settings I've come across: an abandoned big city, a tropic rainforest, and a desert. The city is the most depressing setting. It's very similar to Los Angeles. Beautiful residential areas with suburban homes, a downtown, and a seemingly endless beach. But there is no human life to be seen. And that's exactly the point where my story makes a twist. You probably realized how I told you that there is no human life in my parallel reality. I'll start from the beginning. My first memory of my coma state was the following. I was on a bus. Everything looked kind of vintage to me. The seat had an iron frame, coated by 50s style red leather. It smelled dusty. The magazines that were scattered around the seats had images of post-World War II advertisements showing rockabilly-style women and all the other scenes you could imagine when thinking about that era. Somehow I didn't worry too much about it. I just gazed out the window, seeing the big city approaching gradually. A feeling of excitement overcame me, and I couldn't wait to get off the bus and start exploring. When the bus finally came to a stop at the beach podium, the doors opened. I hopped out and was mesmerized by the sun setting, coloring the sky in the mix of deep and red-orange. I was struck back into reality when I heard the hydraulic bump on the bus doors closing behind me. When I turned around, the bus was already a long distance away, and I asked myself, why didn't the bus driver say goodbye? And more importantly, why am I the only one standing on the beach promenade? For miles, not a single living being was to be seen. I started wandering down the beach promenade. Bikes and cars were parked along the road, but again, nobody was to be seen. I proceeded my exploration and came into a residential area. The sight of beautiful suburban homes with tidy gardens and perfectly parallel parked cars was somehow very unsettling. Something about the whole setting felt off. I left the residential area and made my way downtown. I must have walked for a good hour when I finally found myself in a seemingly endless grid of parallel roads and junctions, surrounded by high-risers. Something was definitely different. There were no cars at all, not a single sign of human activity, just empty roads and buildings. That was the moment when I heard it, the enormously loud sound of a bus honking. In my state of loneliness, I was struck by an overwhelming feeling of deep thankfulness. Maybe I wasn't alone, so I stood at the side of the road, waiting for the bus to show up. I could hear it gradually approaching, and after about 2 minutes I saw it. It was a Greyhound bus, shining brightly in the last rays of sunshine. The sunlight Must have already been a good 2 hours since I first came into the city. Saw the sun setting. I was so deeply sunken into my own thoughts that I almost didn't hear the hydraulic doors open with a loud hiss. I'd been so mentally absent for a few seconds that I wasn't paying attention to the bus at all. From the rear end of the bus, I couldn't see the driver, but without further hesitation, I stepped into the bus. The bus doors immediately closed behind me, and the bus took off. I was standing there in the back of the bus, not sure what to do next. I just waited. The bus made a few turns to the downtown roads, passing the now ever so familiar empty office buildings and towers. Suddenly my vision became blurry, and I faded off into complete darkness. But I wasn't scared, since I could hear my mother talking to me from a distance. "Hello, my dear. I talked to the doctors today. They're doing their best to help you. Dr. Hendricks said that your nervous system just needs a little time to get back on track again. But that can take maybe a few weeks. Okay? So don't be scared. We're all by your side." "Thank you, Mom," I wanted to reply. But with a loud smash, I was ripped out of the conversation with my mom, and I found myself sitting at the very last seat of the bus. It took a few seconds for me to fully understand where I was. As I looked around the bus and out of the windows, an unsettling realization struck me. The bus was now on a freeway. I looked at the back window to see the outline of the city now covered in darkness. That's when I saw it. In the reflection of the window, I could see a figure sitting in the bus's driver's seat. I couldn't see much, only the outline of a humanoid-shaped body sitting there. I turned around, now facing the front of the bus. Still, I could hardly see anything. I hesitated, sitting there and waiting for something to happen, when suddenly, the radio was switched on. "In What a Wonderful World" by Louis Armstrong started playing. A welcoming feeling of safety overcame me. I sat there enjoying the song and looking out of the window. The landscape transformed slowly into a desert-like scenario. Apart from the cactus trees on the side of the road and the occasional road sign, there wasn't much to be seen since it was now dark. The song was still playing when suddenly I heard a voice start singing along. It was a calming voice, resembling an elderly man just calmly singing. I stood up and slowly made my way from the back of the bus into the direction of the driver. That was when the voice slowly pitched down, one step at a time, always keeping beat with the melody. I was struck with terror. It stopped immediately, only to hear the voice pitching down further, until it had reached its lowest pitch, from which the singing continued. I stood there, frozen in fear, in the middle of the bus, listening to that demonic, otherworldly voice happily singing along. I didn't dare do anything but slowly take a seat, almost hiding and pressing myself against the window in my childish hope that this would solve anything. That's how I sat there for what felt like hours. Only me and the utterly gruesome singing humanoid thing, going 70 miles an hour on a desert road on a Greyhound bus. When I'd overcome the first terror, I slowly started gazing around the row that I was sitting in. One of the magazines raised my interest. It said "Warning" on the cover. I took the magazine and opened it, trying to make as little noise as possible. On the first page there was an illustration of a woman, dressed in 50s style clothing. Next to her head there was a bubble containing the following text. "There's a man, they say, who roams around. Be careful indeed when you hear the sound. A greyhound honk is what you'll hear, and that's the time when you feel the fear of the Wonder Man. Yes, that's what he's called, when he sings along to a song so calm. Don't you dare get up from the seat in the rear, 'cause the Wonder Man, he feeds on fear. And when the Wonder Man knows that you're in despair, he's got his tricks to get you there. Where is there, you may ask yourself? It's a place so gruesome you don't want to see, because the Wonder Man, he responds with glee. Don't be afraid, my little child. In my world there is no joy." A feeling of absolute despair struck me. It all started to make sense. This being, whatever it may be, was there to get me. It'll do whatever it takes to induce fear until it finally reaches the capability of getting me. I had to find a way to get out of there as soon as possible. I looked around. The bus was still going fast, and there was no possibility of getting out. Even if I wanted to jump, I couldn't open the doors since the controls were up beside the thing. But my question was answered straight away as the bus came to a stop. As soon as the hydraulic doors opened, I leaped out of them, hitting the concrete hard. It took a few seconds till my eyes had adjusted themselves to the darkness, but I could see that I was in the empty parking lot of a truck stop. Driven by my hope to get out, I started running toward the buildings next to the parking lot and hid behind an electricity meter. I was about 100 yards away from the bus and didn't dare to make a single sound or move. Frozen, I watched the Greyhound, waiting for something to happen. With an enormously loud hiss, the front doors opened, and I saw the silhouette of the so-called Wonder Man slowly making its way out of the bus. It wasn't the fact that the thing was coming outside. It was the way he came outside. The figure was slowly crawling on all fours, one step at a time. Its behind grotesquely stretched out, giving its torso the look of being completely disfigured and crippled. When it reached the concrete floor, it stopped, twisted, and turning its head in search of me. I saw its eyes, subliminally glowing in a yellowish color, and that's when the realization struck me. It's seen me. I jumped up and turned around. I saw in the corner of my eye how it was getting up on two legs and started to make a run for me. I ran into the diner next to the parking lot in lack of a better escape. I opened the door and slammed it back shut again, stumbling around in the darkness. After knocking over a few chairs, I managed to slide over the counter. I could only imagine how peaceful this little diner could be in another scenario, should I say a universe. I crouched behind the counter, trying to catch my breath. A few minutes passed, but when I heard the ring of the bell on top of the door, I knew that I wasn't safe anymore. I heard the door being shut. Slowly but determined, it shrieked and then closed, covering the room in complete silence. That silence was broken by the singing voice of the creature, which now had a name, the Wonder Man. He sang in the same harrowing pitch as before and started to approach me, only one step at a time, obviously enjoying what he did. I knew that I didn't have another choice but to run the other way. I quickly looked around. I couldn't go where I'd come from, so I ran into the kitchen. I stumbled and tapped into complete darkness, pots and dishes smashing on the floor along the way. After what felt like ages, I could suddenly feel some sort of door. I desperately searched for the knob, twisting and turning it, when I heard the Wonder Man running up on me from the kitchen entrance. I slammed myself against the door several times when it suddenly gave in. I jumped blindly into what I thought was some type of storage space, but instead, I was falling. I awoke to the sound of sticks cracking and leaves crunching. When I opened my eyes, I found myself surrounded by a deep tropical rainforest, covered in mist. I got up and looked around. Behind me, I saw the door I'd come through, standing there on its own in the middle of the jungle. That started to make sense. Apparently, I was able to switch between different realities. That was when my surroundings faded away, covering me in darkness. You probably remember when I told you how this had happened to me before, and I could touch the realm of the physical world, hearing my mother talk to me. I couldn't wait to hear my mother's voice. Hopefully she could give me another prognosis on how long I'd be stuck in this nightmare. But it was still only a dream, wasn't it? I could hear the beeping of the heart rate monitor and the recurring hissing of the breathing tubes which were keeping me alive. I waited for some sign of the physical world, and my prayers were heard when the door of the hospital room opened. I finally heard my mother's voice and was relieved. She told me that the doctors are thinking about turning the artificial respirator down in the following days, since you should be able to breathe on your own, which means that you should wake up within a maximum of a week. I wanted to scream out in joy, but of course I couldn't. Only a week of this torment was all I had to endure until I could finally call myself a living human being again. I was startled when I heard the melody of What a Wonderful World playing in the background. My mother started singing along, but then her voice transformed into the nightmarish low-pitched voice of the Wonder Man. In absolute horror, I came to the realization that it wasn't my mother sitting next to my hospital bed. It was the Wonder Man. My stomach started to turn upside down as I learned that the Wonder Man isn't a product of my coma dreams. He was very real, and he's sitting next to my paralyzed body at this very moment. I was pulled into my dream state again, standing in the middle of the forest, panicking. Again, I started to run, this time through thick vines and brushes, desperate to get out of there. After a while, I came across the river, luckily with a canoe on the riverbank. I boarded the device and started to make my way downstream. I felt a weird peacefulness come over me, as I knew that I'd escaped the Wonder Man. So I floated silently in the river for hours until I came to a lake. I decided to abandon the canoe and continue on foot. When I stepped on land, I heard the splattering sounds behind me in the water. I turned around, wanted to see the horrible shadowy figure slowly emerging out of the water, crawling on all fours again. This time I didn't hesitate and sprinted off immediately. I didn't turn around and made a run for a nearby shack. Determined, I slammed the door open and found myself in a little bedroom. Nothing that could help me was to be seen, so I plunged through the back door of the hut. I was surrounded by a beam of light and felt pain shooting through my body as I hit the rock-hard concrete floor of the beach promenade, back where my journey had started. I started walking this time in the other direction. Everything seemed quite peaceful as I wandered along. I'd already come to terms with the fact that I had to escape the Wonder Man for a couple more days until I could finally wake up. But that's when I saw a hospital building across the street. It looked exactly like the medical center in my hometown. I figured if I could walk in there and find the room I was laying in, maybe I could rejoin the world of the living. After entering the building, I walked straight up to the intensive care unit, as my body was most likely to be found there. As I walked through the hallways, I checked the names on the room doors. After passing about 5 doors, I finally saw my name written there. I slowly opened the door and had to cope with my situation. I saw myself lying there in the bed. I just stood there looking at myself. Was it finally time to wake up again?
And when the Wonder Man knows that you're in despair, he's got his tricks to get you there. Where's there, you may ask yourself? It's a place so gruesome you don't want to see. 'Cause the Wonder Man, he responds with glee. Don't be afraid, my little child. In my world there is no joy,
Said a voice behind me. In terror, I turned around, only to see the Wonder Man himself standing there, blocking the entrance to the room. It had been a trap. The Wonder Man had lured me into all this. So it's quite evident that you'd like to know how I'm able to tell you all this. I'm writing this story from the comfort of my desk, hoping that other people can at least grasp the misery that I've went through. I'm lucky that I can write this down and make people understand, except for the fact that I'm in a closed room, without any windows, tied to my chair and hearing the same song, What a Wonderful World, repeatedly. This transcription is the only way I can communicate my misery to the outside world. I'll never know if my story will ever see the light of day, but maybe it will, since I can tell you one thing. The Wonder Man is not just a product of your dream. He's very real.